Want me to mute it?
Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for coming together to immerse ourselves in this rich body of wisdom we call Torah. We are in Torah portion Shoftim, which is in the book of Deuteronomy, beginning in chapter 16 with verse 18. We're going to read through the entire English translation of that portion. I'll share with you a focused study about it, and then we'll open it up for our collaborative conversation about it. If you'd like to unmute, if you're muted at this time, feel free to join in the recitation of our blessing, giving thanks for the opportunity of this moment. Baruch
Baruch
atah
atah
Adonai
Adonai
Eloheinu
Eloheinu
melech
Melech
haolam
haolam,
haolam
asher
asher
kiddushanu
Kiddushanu
b'mitzvotav
b'mitzvotav
b'mitzvotav,
v'tzivanu
v'tzivanu
la'asot
la'asot
b'divrei
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 Torah.
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 Thank you, God, for the opportunity to immerse ourselves in words, deeds, and relationships of Torah. I'll share with you the opening verses, and then I'll invite others to have an opportunity to read as well. Book of Deuteronomy, chapter 16, verse 18. You shall appoint magistrates and officials for your tribes in all the settlements that Adonai your God is giving you, and they shall govern the people with due justice. You shall not judge unfairly. You shall show no partiality. You shall not take bribes, for bribes blind the eyes of the discerning and upset the plea of the just. Justice, justice shall you pursue, that you may thrive and occupy the land that Adonai your God is giving you. You shall not set up a sacred post, any kind of pole beside the altar of Adonai your God that you may make, or erect a stone pillar, for such Adonai your God detests. Sherry, we're at the very beginning of chapter 17. Would you like to read a little bit?
Thank you. You shall not sacrifice to the Lord your God an ox or a sheep that has had any defect of serious kind, for that is abhorrent to the Lord. If there is found among you in one of the settlements that the Lord your God is giving you, a man or a woman who has affronted the Lord your God and transgressed his covenant, turning to the worship of other gods and bowing down to them, to the sun or to the moon or any of the heavenly host, something I never commanded, and you shall have been informed or have learned of it, then you shall make a thorough inquiry. If it is true, the fact is established that a abhorrent thing was perpetrated in Israel, you shall take that man or woman who did that wicked thing out to the public place, and you shall stone them, man or woman, to death. And here's number 6. It's terrible.
A person shall be put to death only on the testimony of 2 or more witnesses. He must not be put to death on the testimony of a single witness. Let the hands of the witnesses be the first against him to put him to death, and the hands of the rest of the people thereafter. Thus you will sweep out evil from your midst.
Thank you so much, both of you. Let me invite Mark Levinstein, if you'd like to read a little bit. We're at verse 8.
Thank you, Rabbi. If a case is too baffling for you to decide, be it a controversy over homicide, civil law, or assault, matters of dispute in your courts, you shall promptly repair to the place that the Lord your God will have chosen, and appear before the Levitical priests or the magistrate in charge at the time, and present your problem. When they have announced to you the verdict in the case, you shall carry out the verdict that is announced to you from the place that the Lord chose, observing scrupulously all their instructions to you. You shall act in accordance with the instructions given you and the ruling handed down to you. You must not deviate from the verdict that they announce to you either to the right or to the left. Should a man act presumptuously and disregard the priest charged with serving there the Lord your God, or the magistrate, that man shall die. Thus you will sweep out evil from Israel. All the people will hear and be afraid, and will not act presumptuously again.
Thank you so much. Bill, would you like to read? We're at verse 14.
I'd be honored, Rabbi. Thank you.
If, after you have entered the land that the Eternal your God has assigned to you, and taken possession of it and settled in it, you decide, I will be set a king over me, as do all the nations about me, you shall be free to set a king over yourself, one chosen by the Eternal your God. Be sure to set as a king over yourself one of your own people. You must not set a foreigner over you, one who is not your kin. Moreover, he shall not keep many horses or send people back to Egypt to add to his horses. Since the Eternal has warned you, you must not go back that way again. And he shall not have many wives, lest his heart go astray, nor shall he amass silver and gold to excess. When he is seated on his royal throne, he shall have a copy of the teaching written for him on a scroll by the Levitical priests. Let it remain with him, and let him read it all of his life, so that he may learn to revere the Eternal his God, to observe faithfully every word of this teaching, as well as these laws. Thus he will not act haughtily towards his fellows, or deviate from the instruction to the right or to the left, to the end that he and his descendants may reign long in the midst of Israel.
Thanks, Bill. Norm, we're at the very start of chapter 18, if you'd like to read a little bit there.
The Levitical priests, the whole tribe of Levi, shall have no territorial portion with Israel. They shall live only off Adonai's offerings by fire as their portion, and shall have no portion among their brother tribes. Adonai is their portion as promised. This then shall be the priest's due from the people. Everyone who offers a sacrifice, whether an ox or a sheep, must give the shoulder, the cheeks, and the stomach to the priest. You shall also give him the first fruits of your new grain and wine and oil, and the first sharing of your sheep. For your God Adonai has chosen him and his descendants out of all of the tribes to be in attendance for service in the name of Adonai for all time. If a Levite would go for any of the settlements through the land throughout Israel where he has been residing to the place that Adonai has chosen, he may do so whenever he pleases. He may serve in the name of his God Adonai, like all of his fellow Levites who are in attendance before Adonai. They shall receive equal share of the dues without regard to personal gifts or patrimonies.
Thank you so much, Norm. And Robert, we're at verse 9 of chapter 18, if you'd like to read a little bit.
Yes, thank you. When thou art come into the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not learn to do after the abominations of those nations. There shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, or that useth divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer. For all that do these things are an abomination unto the Lord. And because of these abominations, the Lord thy God doth drive them out from before thee. Thou shalt be perfect with the Lord thy God. For these nations which thou shalt possess hearkened unto observers of times and unto diviners. But as for thee, the Lord thy God hath not suffered thee so to do. The Lord thy God will raise up unto thee a prophet from the midst of thee, of thy brethren, like unto me. Unto him he shall hearken. According to all that thou desirest of the Lord thy God in Oreb in the day of the assembly, saying, Let me not hear again the voice of the Lord my God, neither let me see this great fire any more, that I die not. And the Lord said unto me, They have well spoken that which they have spoken. I will raise them up a prophet from among their brethren, like unto thee, and will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak unto them all that I shall command him. And it shall come to pass that whosoever will not hearken unto my words, which he shall speak in my name, I will require it of him.
Today?
But the prophet which shall presume to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or that shall speak in the name of other gods, even that prophet shall die. And if thou say in thine heart, how shall we know the word which the Lord hath not spoken? When a prophet speaketh in the name of the Lord, if the thing follow not, nor come to pass, that is the thing which the Lord hath not spoken. But the prophet hath spoken it presumptuously. Thou shalt not be afraid of him.
Thank you so much, Robert. Jim, we're at the very start of chapter 19, if you'd like to read a little bit.
Not speaking. Well, he's calling somebody.
Thank you, Rabbi. When Adonai your God has cut down the nations whose land Adonai your God is assigning to you, you have dispossessed them and settled in their towns and homes. You shall set aside 3 cities in the land that Adonai your God is giving you to possess. You shall survey the distances and divide into 3 parts the territory of the country that Adonai your God has allotted to you, so that any manslayer may have a place to flee to. Now, this is the case of the manslayer who may flee there and live, one who has killed another unwittingly without having been his enemy in the past. For instance, a man goes with his neighbor into a grove to cut wood. As his hand swings the axe to cut down a tree, the axe head flies off the handle and strikes the other so that he dies. That man shall flee to one of these cities and live. Otherwise, when the distance is great, the blood avenger pursuing the manslayer in hot anger may overtake him and kill him. Yet he did not incur the death penalty, since he had never been the other's enemy. That is why I command you set aside 3 cities.
Thanks so much, Jim. And Carl, would you like to read a little bit? We're at verse 8 of chapter 19.
Sure. And when Adonai enlarges your territory, as he swore to your fathers, and gives you all the land that he promised to give your fathers, if you faithfully observe all this instruction, and I enjoin upon you this day to love Adonai and to walk in his ways at all times, then you shall add 3 more towns to those 3 cities. Thus blood of the innocent will not be shed, bringing blood guilt upon you in the land that Adonai is allotting to you. If, however, a person who is the enemy of another lies in wait for him and gets upon him and strikes him with a fatal blow, and then flees to one of these towns, the elders of his town shall have him brought back from there and shall hand him over to the blood avenger to be put to death. You must show him no pity. Thus you will purge Israel of the blood of the innocent, and it will go well with you. You shall not move your countrymen's landmarks set up previous generations in the property that will be allotted to you in the land Adonai is giving to you to possess. A single witness may not validate against a person any guilt or blame for any offense that may be committed. A case can be valid only on the testimony of 2 witnesses or more. If a man appears against another to testify maliciously and gives false testimony against him, the 2 parties to the dispute shall appear before Adonai, before the priests or magistrates in authority at the time, and the magistrates shall make a thorough investigation. If the man who testified is a false witness, if he has testified falsely against his fellow, you shall do to him as he schemed to do to his fellow. Thus you will sweep out evil from your midst. Others will hear and be afraid, and such evil things will not again be done in your midst. Nor must you show pity, life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot.
Thank you, Carl. David and Susan, we're at the very start of chapter 20, if you'd like to read.
Thank you, Rabbi.
David, okay. When you an Israelite warrior, take the field against your enemies and see horses and chariots, forces larger than yours. Have no fear of them, for your God Adonai, who brought you from the land of Egypt, is with you. Before you join battle, the priest shall come forward and address the troops. He shall say to them, Hear, O Israel, you are about to join battle with your enemy. Let not your courage falter. Do not be in fear or in panic or in dread of them, for it is your God, Adonai, who marches with you to do battle for you against your enemy to bring you victory.
And the officers shall speak to the people, saying, Who is a man who has built a new house and is not dedicated? Let him go, and let him go back to his house in case he would die in the war, and another man would dedicate it. And who is a man who has planted a vineyard and has not desanctified it? Let him go, and let him go back to his house in case he would die in the war, and another man desanctify it. And who is a man who has betrothed a woman and not taken her? Let him go. Let him go back to his house in case he would die in the war and another man would take her. And the officer shall continue to speak to the people and say, Who is a man who is afraid and weak-hearted? Let him go back to his house so he won't melt his brother's hearts like his heart. And it will be when the officers finish speaking to the people that they shall appoint officers of the armies at the head of the people.
Thank you so much, so much. Catherine, we're at verse 10 of chapter 20, if you'd like to read.
Thank you, Rabbi. When you approach a town to attack it, you shall offer it terms of peace. If it responds peaceably and lets you in, all the people present there shall serve you at forced labor. If it does not surrender to you, but would join battle with you, you shall lay siege to it. And when the Lord your God delivers it into your hand, you shall put all its males to the sword. You may, however, take as your booty the women, the children, the livestock, and everything in the town, all its spoil, and enjoy the use of the spoil of your enemy, which Adonai your God gives you. Thus you shall deal with all towns that lie very far from you, towns that do not belong to nations hereabout. In the towns of the latter peoples, however, which Adonai your God is giving you as a heritage, you shall not let a soul remain alive. No, you must proscribe them, the Hittites and the Amorites, the Canaanites and the Perizzites, the Hivites and the Jebusites, as Adonai your God has commanded you, lest they lead you into doing all the abhorrent things that they have done for their gods, and you stand guilty before Adonai your God. When in your war against a city, you have to besiege it a long time in order to capture it. You must not destroy its trees, wielding the axe against them. You may eat of them, but you must not cut them down. Are trees of the field human to withdraw before you into the besieged city? Only trees that you know do not yield food may be destroyed. You may cut them down for constructing siege works against the city that is waging war on you until it has been reduced.
Thank you so much. Linda and Justin, we're at the very start of chapter 21. If the two of you would like to read a little bit there.
What happened there?
Thank you, Rabbi. The beginning of chapter 21.
Yeah.
If a slain person be found in the land which the Lord your God is giving you to possess, lying in the field, and it is not known who slew him, then your elders and judges shall go forth, and they shall measure to the cities around the corpse. And it will be that from the city closer to the corpse, the elders of that city shall take a calf with which work has never been done. Sorry about the cat. And that has never drawn a yoke. And the elders of that city shall bring the calf down to a rugged valley, which was neither tilled nor sown. And there in the valley they shall decapitate the calf. And the Kohanim, the sons of Levi, shall approach, for the Lord your God has chosen them to serve him and to bless him, and to bless in the name of the Lord. And by their mouth shall every controversy and every lesion be judged. And all the elders of that city, who are the nearest to the corpse, shall wash their hands over the calf that was decapitated in the valley. And they shall announce and say, our hands did not shed this blood, nor did our eyes see this crime. Atone for your people Israel, whom you have redeemed, O Lord, and lay not the guilt of innocent blood among your people Israel. And so the blood shall be atoned for them.
And you shall abolish the shedding of innocent blood from among you, for you shall do what is proper in the eyes of the Lord.
Indeed. Thank you. That's our entire Torah portion for the week. Thank you so much, everyone. I'd like to share with you a little focused study about it. And what's happening, at least in the surface of the text of this week's portion, is, well, let's imagine the scene. In terms of the narrative, the Israelites are there at the border, ready to cross over the Jordan to enter into this land that has been promised to them. It's been part of their dreamlike state for generations and generations. And they're getting final instructions about what to do once they've crossed over and have settled in the land. And the majority of their text has to do with the establishment of a series of positions of responsibility for the governance of this nation that's being established. There are rules about how to wage war. There are further instructions about matters of the ritual of offerings and services. And so in one sense, as I read it, I'm overwhelmed by the construct, the superstructure of an administrative state that is now being instructed to them. And then as I read it more deeply, I realized how much of that is really a series of limitations on how power should be exercised. So we experience that when there are these recitations about the nature of a king. And one of the things that's fascinating about the reference to a king is that it's the only time in the Torah where they are instructed or given permission to do something that the rest of the nations do. Otherwise, our instructions in Torah have to do with don't do what the rest of the nations do. But there is something, but this is the only one where it says, well, if you're going to appoint a king like the rest of the world does, you can do so under these conditions. And those are conditions of limitation. A king can't own many horses, can't have many wives, can't amass silver and gold to excess. And then there's this reference to the issue of someone who is pursuing someone who they have identified as having killed a relative of theirs. And there's this prescription of creating these cities of refuge to which someone who's been accused in that sense can flee to and thereby have sanctuary from the pursuing blood avenger. The whole notion of honor killings, which unfortunately continues to exist to this day, was probably something rampant in cultures throughout this area at this time. And here, Torah is placing a restraint on the capacity of someone who feels that a relative of theirs has been unjustly killed their ability to just go after and seek vengeance by killing this person. So that's another level in which there's this limitation on unrestrained power. And then we have this series of verses having to do with the waging of war. And there's that one verse that we read, when in your war against a city, you have to besiege it a long time in order to capture it. You must not destroy its fruit-bearing trees. So the idea of depriving an army of its capacity to use whatever is at hand in order to besiege a city, to break down its walls, to overcome its gates, is rather compelling because the nature of a fruit tree is that it is bearing something that is going to sustain life in the future. And so armies are forbidden from tearing down, cutting down those kinds of trees. So I was quite taken by the nature of the number of restraints on the unfettered exercise of power, whether it is by a king, by an avenging kinsman, whether it is by an army waging war. And then there's constant repetition going back to the nature of idolatry. And we'll get to that in a moment, and how that is also a form of restraint. And the Haftarah for this week's portion comes from what's known as the second Isaiah. This is a figure who lived during the crisis of the end of the Babylonian exile, is living in that liminal moment, that interval before the defeat of Babylon, the rise of the Persian Empire, the defeat of Babylon by Persia under King Cyrus, and King Cyrus's release of those who've been held in exile in Babylon, allowing them to return to the land of Israel. So it fascinates me, first of all, that this week's portion has, in a sense, supplementing it, these particular sections from Second Isaiah, and especially this verse here. I've put my words in your mouth and covered you with the shadow of my hand to plant heavens and establish earth. So here is Isaiah, uh, who is there during this moment of both crisis and transition in the 6th century BCE, when the ascendant empire of Persia is now waging war against Babylon. And the people have been living in Babylon in exile for generations, probably 40 years or so. And in this middle of this crisis, the prophet Isaiah arises and speaks in a rather unique language in terms of the prophetic books. That is a language that is sharing with the people their sense of grief. He's sharing with them tears. He's sharing with them a sense of the mystery of it all, and he's encouraging them neither to remain passive in the face of this imminent defeat of Babylon and this imminent victory by Persia, but he's also not advising them to kind of pick up arms and join in the fray against Babylon. He's encouraging them to look forward to the future and to the possibilities that this moment presents. And he has this phrase, I have put my words in your mouth and covered you with the shadow of my hand to plant heavens and establish earth. In a sense of following this theme about restraint, it fascinates me that this prophet, who's given the name Isaiah, but whose name we really don't know, that's why he's called the second Isaiah. So in a sense, he's an anonymous prophet, unlike the other prophets, Jeremiah, Hosea, and so forth. And this reference, I've put my words in your mouth and covered you with the shadow of my hand. For me, evoke that scene where Moses goes before God in Parshat Kitisa, which is the dramatic moment in which is that moment of the golden calf. And after the moment of the golden calf, Moses has this moment of intimacy with God and says to God, "Let me behold your presence." And God says, "Well, I'm going to pass by you. I'm going to shield you with my hand. And then I will take away my hand after having passed by you, and you'll see my back." So what is this notion about placing the hand over the one who wants to see the full presence of God? Here's the way I understand it, particularly as it occurs within the context of immediately following the golden calf. The golden calf in Jewish tradition is the iconic moment of, of tending towards idolatry. And the way our sages understand idolatry is that it is not so much a worshiping of an all-powerful figure, but rather it is a desire for human control, the desire to think that one can manipulate and somehow appease a greater power. And so our tradition understands idolatry ultimately as an avenue for the human hubris and a desire for control over everything, including nature. And so when this is, we've seen it in our Torah portion in Kitisa, the terrible consequences of trying to pursue idolatry. And when Moses, just moments later, says, "Let me behold your presence," there's kind of a gentler reminder, if you will, from God saying, "No, you, you, to behold all of me is merely another attempt by a human to want to know everything." And the desire to know everything is ultimately a desire to be able to control everything. And that is not so much a denigration of God, it's a denigration of self. Because when one seeks to control and know everything, that is a self-injury that prevents one from being one's fulfilled, content, happy, and unanxious self, if you will. So this notion about placing the hand over one's eyes has to do with, I'm going to, in a sense, restrain your desire for knowing everything in a way that expresses your desire to control everything. And by covering your eyes, I'm going to prevent you, in a sense, from harming yourself that way by not living a life of constant anxiety, constant desire to feeling that there's more I need to know, more I need to control. Okay, so in a sense, it's what I call a sense of sacred constraint. So there's something about withholding um, that we'll see. Well, here, let's pursue this. This notion about this verse from Isaiah is picked up by the Zohar. And the Zohar refers to that verse about putting words in your mouth and covering you with the shadow of my hand, meaning by covering you, by relieving you of that desire to control everything, what I'm really doing is releasing within you your true creativity, your true originality, your true sense of responsibility. And so the Zohar says, picks up on Isaiah's verse and says, what it means to have the words of the divine within our mouth means that we have the capacity to interpret Torah in innovative, uniquely individual ways. And those new innovations in the beautiful poetic mythology of the Zohar, it describes those innovations as going up to heaven, being kissed by the divine up there, and then returning to earth, and in a sense, reforming the earth in newness with all of these new innovations that have come from human beings. So there's something about that kind of sacred restraint that unleashes a human creativity, originality, and responsibility. And so one can think about this incident that's described both in our Torah portion Ki Tisa with Moses and God, and in the Haftorah reading as being the warning about, well, in Greek culture, you might call it the Oedipal moment, the moment when one wants to kill the father figure, one wants to displace the elders who have been governing, one wants to, in the name of a TV show, one wants to do away with the patriarch who's running the business and take over the business. You know, all those notions of displacing the father figure here is being warned about in the sense of one needs to not desire to defeat and overcome and kill the authority figure. One needs to unleash the authority figure that lies within oneself. So here I want to just share with you. Uh, this is number 5 in our study sheet, is the reference that I mentioned from the Zohar. Rabbi Shimon opened, I have put my words in your mouth. And then Rabbi Shimon goes on to uh, explain how vital it is for a human being to engage in Torah day and night. For the Blessed Holy One listens to the voice of those who occupy themselves with Torah, and every word innovated in Torah fashions a heaven. They descend upon the earth, which is renewed and transformed into a new earth, as it is written, as the new heavens and the new earth that I am making endure before me. So the Zohar has this lovely, lovely image of that creative, innovative interpretations uh, is a way of creating the earth anew, new heavens and new earth. With that, I'd like to share with you the painting uh, that is by Edward Hopper. And Edward Hopper, I have to admit, Edward Hopper, I have just often kind of glanced by rather than really spent time with. Uh, and by that, I mean, I look at his paintings, and a lot of his paintings, especially those of urban scenes, strike me as they have many art critics as being expressions of urban alienation, disconnection, loneliness, despair. Okay. And here we have a painting called Rooms by the Sea, when there are no uh, people. And this is not an urban setting. This is a setting that is based upon his vacation home and art studio in Truro on Cape Cod in Massachusetts. And what's fascinating to me is that we have, in a sense, well, either 2 or 3 rooms, depending upon how you want to look at it. On the left-hand side, we have a room that is just a narrow bit of it that we can see. It's a furnished room. One might think perhaps it's a living room. And then the one that occupies the center of the space is, we think, his studio space, which is empty. It has this light coming through it. And then it has a doorway, and the doorway then immediately opens up into the expanse of the sea and the horizon beyond. There's no land outside that doorway. It is just the infinite watery expanse. And so when I look at that, I think that there is what's significant about Hopper is in all of his paintings how still everything is. The palette itself, the way the figures or the landscape itself is presented, everything is quite restrained. And here we have this aesthetic of restraint, which now offers at least three different possibilities. The one on the left, that of the occupied closed space, the artistic open space in the middle, and then just the open expanse, the infinite expanse of the horizon and the sea. So here, I'm now thinking about our Haftarah and our Torah portion. In the Torah portion, the Israelites are in this liminal moment in their lives. They're literally at the border between the wilderness and settlement. And I can imagine what the Israelites must have been experiencing. Finally, we get to leave the wilderness behind and we get to settle into a land. We get to govern ourselves instead of being in either uh, out in the wilderness, and we can set up farms and we can set up means of trade and travel. We can have our own uh, security force to take care of us. The rush to, if you will, fill up that space and impose themselves, which we get hints of here in the text, is somehow being, want to characterize as being restrained somewhat. Or if one wants to think about it, not so much in the historical moment of the Israelites at the border, think about it in more of a psychological terms. One is in that liminal moment between being cared for as a child and adolescent and ready to now assume the power of being an adult and the dangers that can come with that. As I say, the desire to displace those who have been in charge for too long, either the father or the father who's the head of the business or the father who's the king, to displace them and say, you've been here long enough. And so there are these messages here of trying to restrain that individual, that people, from exercising that which is ultimately destructive, not only for oneself, but for others. And so here we have in this painting, Rooms by the Sea, this level of restraint. And I'm thinking back about the people that occupy Hopper's urban scenes. The one of the individuals in Nighthawks, people sitting around in a coffee shop, and there's that one individual who's working behind the counter. And then there's a painting of, in a rural setting, of a gas station, and there's a person who is there ready to pump gas. And there are many other scenes of people in an office. And I'm thinking, well, one can view those as people who are either just purely alienated, disconnected, or one can view them as people who have shown up to do their job, to serve the coffee, to pump the gas, to produce the documents, whatever it is that those people are showing up to do for their work. And yes, they are perhaps feeling their sense of disconnection. But perhaps since they have shown up, they're also ready for something new. They're ready to overcome their sense of isolation. They're ready for a new future. And here in this painting, Rooms by the Sea, maybe that's what Hopper is offering all of us. Uh, the gas station attendant, the coffee shop worker, the office worker, and you and me, who are caught up in a present that has somehow alienated us from one another, who has created in a world in which we seem so disconnected from one another. And he's providing us this painting and saying, there is another possibility. There is an infinite expanse out there that is possible for you. And I want to suggest that, in a sense, is what the second Isaiah is offering up to his people. Don't take up arms against the Babylonians. Don't seek revenge. for these 40 years that you've been captive. You need to let go of that desire and find instead a way of the mystery and the love that will allow you to replant and rebuild. And that is, I think, what Abraham Joshua Heschel is referring to when he writes in his book, The Prophets, about the second Isaiah. He writes, the message of second Isaiah is of no age. It is a prophecy tempered with human tears, mixed with a joy that heals all scars, clearing a way for understanding the future in spite of the present. This beautiful message I'm getting from Hopper, from second Isaiah, from Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, from our Torah portion, has to do with the sacred restraint that can dissuade us from exercising destructive, a destructive uh, autonomy, a destructive desire to control everything, and to replace it with a sense of the mystery, a self-restraint, which opens us up to love, to creativity, and to the creating of both new heavens and new earths. So with that, I'd love to know what you experienced and what you thought in the reading of our Torah portion, reading through the verses from our Haftarah portion, and looking at Edward Hopper's painting. If you'd raise your hand, I'd love to call upon you. Go ahead, Rose.
Oh, hi. First of all, I put something in the chat about what I think is the musical equivalent of Hopper's work. And interestingly enough, that's what they use to illustrate it on YouTube, but the YouTube link is there. Aaron Copland's Quiet City. But anyway, there are a couple of things that kind of wonder me, as we used to say in Amish country. I'm unclear if is the responsibility for executing somebody who, clearly offed someone, who clearly killed someone with forethought, like committed the equivalent of first-degree murder, up to the blood relative, the blood avenger, or to the court system. It's unclear from this whose responsibility it is because, they say like the elders can give this guy, if this guy actually was in a first-degree murder or second-degree murder, to the elders to give him to the blood avenger versus executing him. But then we have this whole other track which says, well, you have to have two witnesses and he has to be warned and doodly do. So, and clearly these people, this was not like Law and Order where you had detectives and things like that, because clearly as you go on, if it's not obvious who did it, like they just find somebody who's dead, they say, well, the likelihood is that it's somebody in the closest city. And since we don't have any good way of finding out about this unless somebody turns them in, we're just going to say, well, you can only balance blood with blood. Like there always has to be a balance. And this is a very, kind of ancient concept, blood with blood. So we don't know who killed him. So we're just going to kill an animal and use that blood because we don't know who did it because we're not.
So you raise a couple of different issues. One has to
Yeah,
do with
but a lot of it is like
yeah,
I'm trying to understand like the
right.
principles of
Right.
jurisprudence here, and it's not always clear.
Okay, so of course the text of the Torah, in terms of the five books of Moses, as we know, is never the end of the story.
Well, no, but
And
even this is confusing.
so the story gets picked up by the rabbis who read it, and they add to it, expand upon it with midrash, and they also expand upon it with the halacha that appears within the Talmud. So you've got two issues that you point out. One is what's known as the blood avenger, which is the reference to the need for these cities of refuge. And then the other has to do with this unsolved murder that happens with it between two cities. So the Talmud in the volume known as Sanhedrin goes into a great deal of detail about what constitutes a capital crime, what and then what constitutes the nature of these cities of sanctuary, how they're to be set up, and how they're to be operated. And it's very clear that this is a space in which people who have been accused by a relative of having killed a relative of theirs, they are finding a safe space so that a trial can take place, so that principles and order and protocol of courts can assess what's going on. The other about the murder, the dead body that is found between two cities is fascinating because, in one sense, people could shrug and say, "Hey, we don't know who killed this person. It's too bad," you know. And the Torah insists the fact that mere criminal liability can't be determined doesn't relieve us as a people from moral responsibility for what happened to this person. And so whatever city is closest to it, we're not saying you are criminally responsible for what happened to this person, but you're morally responsible for going through some kind of a ritual that will purify you and remind the community of the need to take care of one another. So the Torah doesn't end here. The Torah, in a sense, continues through these innovative understandings that get expressed through the rabbinic midrash, through the Talmud, and through our own ongoing conversations about it. There's so many people that have remarks. I want to thank you, Rosa. Let me call upon people who have raised hands there, out there, and in here. Let me call upon David and Susan first.
Thank you, Rabbi. To be overly anthropological about it, the way I take the same confusion that Rose is expressing about the kinslayer, which doesn't seem to have a legal system of courts and judges, and then the other parts of our Torah portion where there are courts and judges, especially in a city context, is to recall that in the development of legal systems, there were no legal systems to start with. In the beginning, there were families that would try to enforce their will on other families. And then it was true of clans. And the clan-based societies today, you have a responsibility if a relative of yours is murdered to execute the punishment. And at some point, we get communities that have a higher level of control than just clans and clans, where there's wars between clans when there's or there is an assembly of clan heads to deal with the fact that this clan and that clan have a feud. And to me, this Torah portion is very vividly expressing the social environment when you're on the cusp of transforming into a system of family and clan who fight with each other. And then you have associations of clans, and you have assemblies of clan leaders, and then you get governments where a king or a count or some mean-ass killer person says, I am the law, and I'll decide. You can't go executing people, only I can. And we see in this Torah portion the beginning of the development of Jewish halakha, which incidentally I recently discovered there are two legal systems inside of Talmud. One is the one we study when we talk about how many witnesses you make in order to execute somebody or something. And that's the halakhic legal system. But there's also something called the king's legal system.
And the king's legal system does not have to follow all the rules that the rabbis have to follow when they are being a court. So we have, it's like the Catholic having canon law and civil law. There's a whole different legal system for when a priest is in charge than when the knights and warriors and officers of the king are in charge. So I just want to say what you got me thinking about was this compelling cinematic moment in Lawrence of Arabia. When Lawrence is first with the character Omar Sharif, and they're at a water well, uh, and well, no, before Omar Sharif shows up, he's with this fellow who's been assigned to him to guide him through the desert to meet the other tribes, and they come upon this water well, and this one character from one of the tribes starts to drink from it, and then off in the distance, what you can barely see it is is a spot of a figure uh, galloping towards him, and the figure in the foreground gets worried and starts to flee, and the next thing that happens is he gets shot by the character on the horse, and that's Omar Sharif, and Lawrence is stunned, shocked. What has happened here? Someone was drinking water and he gets shot. And Sharif says he was drinking from my tribe's well, and he had no permission to do so. So that got what you were referring to is what's being revealed here or hinted at is this primal, unrestrained code of the wilderness, if you will. And that's not just something that exists geographically. It exists in us, in you and me, and each one of us who's here. We have within us a primal code of the wilderness. And if that is left unrestrained, we will devour ourselves, the world around us, and our own self in the course of it. And so, what Torah is doing here is it's saying the transition from wilderness to responsibility requires a restraint that is ultimately not limiting, it is expanding. Sacred restraint is expanding. If I cover your eyes, I'm covering your eyes so that you will be relieved of that anxiety of wanting to know everything. And when you're relieved of that, you will see everything you need to see in order to have a life of happiness and fulfillment. You will be relieved, you will be liberated of that destructive desire, of the primal, unrestrained code of the wilderness to like destroy and kill. Okay, so thank you so much for bringing that up. Susan, do you want to share? You'll need to unmute. So.
It's kind of simple, really, but what this thing about second Isaiah and about the hand in front, in front of the face, I'm reminded of eating something that somebody fixed and loving it and asking them for the recipe, and they say, no, I don't share my recipes. And the result is that because I loved it, I went and developed my own recipe. So I got to see further and do more than had I been given the recipe.
So this is fantastic. You're living out what Rabbi Shimon in the Zohar says is that when you're pressed upon to study this matter, and instead of merely repeating the words of Torah, you are now being given the opportunity to come up with your own, to innovate these words of Torah. You're going to create a new earth, a new recipe. So that's lovely. All right, let me call upon Catherine, Justin, Linda, and then some folks sitting around the table here. So Catherine.
Yeah, I just have something which will seem rather mundane compared to this, but two small observations. The first has to do with at the end of chapter 20, when they address the trees in the field. And I was thinking that it's sort of stressing the importance of trees as witnesses to this change. And a witness that is going to give fruit, moreover. And so this, I mean, I found it very striking because here we have really this message of respect for nature, respect for the earth.
It's beautiful. So one way of reading the text is as a question, are trees of the field human? Another way to read it is humans are trees of the field, isn't
Yes.
it? Which is what you're getting at. That's beautiful. That's lovely, and certainly not mundane, Catherine. So,
Okay.
Catherine.
The other reflection has to do with the painting. And I really, thinking about this idea of liminality in that room, I see it also as a metaphor for an artist's choice to depict the interior of something or the exterior.
Mm.
Do we stay within the interior? And here I'm thinking of Emily Dickinson and Walt Whitman, right? I mean, do we stay within the interior of a dwelling and try to make art out of that, or do we venture forth into this vast expanse and create within that?
So I'm not going to get the quote exactly right, but Hopper said something like the role of an artist is to express the expanse of his or her interior self. And so in that sense, one looks at these paintings and said, "Oh my gosh, poor Edward Hopper, his interior self was full of angst and existential worry and loneliness." But one can look at them also and say, no, his interior self was aware of that level of alienation and was provoking us to consider the possibilities of an expanse beyond that. And I get that in particular in this painting. So,
Okay,
thank you.
great. Thank you.
Let me call upon Justin, Linda, and then some folks around the table here. Yeah.
Rabbi, thank you so much for hosting this and having the time and space to do this. Linda, did you have anything that you wanted to share or?
Nothing that's coming to me at the very moment.
So there's a spontaneous poetry fragment that emerged out of this reading of the Parshat, and it's called The Stoning. The stoning. Let no stone be lifted until the breath of the accused has been counted, named, and mourned. 1, 2, or 3 witnesses. Let the witnesses be silenced until they have wept for the voice they would extinguish. Let the sword rust in the mouth of the prophet who speaks only in echoes. Let the elders forget their verdict until they have dreamed the dreams of the condemned.
Mm.
Let the law stammer. Let the scrolls unravel. Let the ink bleed into the margins where the monsters dwell. Let delay be our offering. Let hesitation be our prayer. Let the hand tremble before it becomes a fist. And if we must strike, let it be with the knowledge that we have murdered a world.
Just that's really stunning. Who wrote that?
That's you and I and the AI in this session.
Wow. The phrase, may delay be our offering, may hesitation be our prayer. Really, really compelling. And I just want to add that in the Talmud, in this section about called Sanhedrin, which is all about the judicial system, there is a statement by the rabbis that you can only judge once you have, in a sense, walked in that person's shoes. That you have to have experienced in order to be able to be any kind of a judge. So it's not an abstract matter to be a judge. It is a matter of interpreting human experience. So that one has also shared. So thank you so much for that. Let me call upon some beautiful. Richard. Yeah, go ahead, Richard, and then Steve.
Oh, just briefly, you got me thinking about the one notion that God recreates nature daily and needs our help and allows the light to come into us. And that's what this is telling us, that what we're looking for with restraint is civilization. Whether or not, with God's help, we can bring that to existence in material life is yet to reveal itself. And when second Isaiah, puts something on our lips, puts something like Jeremiah, a new heart for you, we're given that. It's part of us. We're part of the singularity. And when we recognize that and allow that to flow through us, we're in good shape. And just as you say, that once you try to get total control, like Lord of the Flies, you've missed it. You've confused that you're separate and apart from all this other, rather than being a part of it and learning how to govern yourselves. And I'm reminded of the advice I got from one of my first employers, who didn't know how to do something. And I needed to learn how to do it from him. And he said, when you're green, you grow. When you're ripe, you rot. And I think that this teaches us that, wait a minute, don't think you know it all. You don't. You've rotted out on taking responsibility for adjusting the restraint and the creation part of you with God's help coming through you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Richard. Thank you so much. And Steve, do you want?
Yeah, I was wondering if I interpreted this right. He said if you choose essentially a king like the other people around you, you're supposed to operate this way, and he gives all of these things. But did he have something in mind? Maybe maybe if you create a democracy, you would operate some other way. But is that somewhere else in the Bible?
Well, of course, the
I've
notion of
never heard.
democracy doesn't exist at this point in history, but there's clearly an understanding that this notion of having a king is not a fully positive vision. That is one fraught with all kinds of problems. And the phrase itself, he shall not keep many horses, not have many wives, or amass silver and gold. One of the greatest and wisest kings of Israel had many wives, kept many horses, and had a lot of silver and gold. Right? So that was Solomon. And so the idea is that even the best of us under that system are subject to displaying our frailties and our imperfections. So there's a clear worry and bias that this is not going to be this is going to be a self-indulgence to have a king. So let me call upon, I got Robert here who's ready to, unless Sherry, did you want to say something?
Well, I could just say this. I'm reading this book on Hopper, and it makes a comment about this particular painting, and it describes that Hopper addresses the contrast between a pristine, intrinsically anti-human nature and a civilization abandoned by humanity. The empty rooms, This direct confrontation between the two realms has an almost surreal effect. And one of the things I was thinking about, I'm thinking about Rod Steiger, who wrote all these science fiction books in the 19 and for the Twilight Zone during the 1950s. And so many of his stories talk about a civilization that's been abandoned by humanity. And I was thinking about this painting, and I was thinking to myself, the light coming in, I'm wondering what time of day this is. Is this in the evening? Is this in the morning? And what is Hopper trying to say by this, with this light coming in, this shaft of light, that it's abandoned by humanity, but there's this, that it leaves a light behind? I don't know.
I don't know either, other than to say, is the the light, I experience the light as drawing me towards the possibility,
Yes.
the possibility of the expanse, uh, and that I can be expanded by embracing that infinite, which is, the notion of entering into the infinite. One can imagine that the result would be feeling infinitesimal. But the Jewish notion is that when you embrace the infinite, you become far larger than you ever imagined you could be. So let me call upon Robert. Yeah.
Thank you again for a lovely evening. I mean, it's just so many wonderful comments. There really isn't much for me to say except, Justin, thank you so much. It takes a lot to move me in the way of poetry because most of it's just too pedestrian for me. But I really like that. And it shows the power of the arts when it's interjected. Now, we have that every time. So, whatever you did, it was absolutely wonderful. And Rose, thank you for the reference. I'm going to check that out. What struck me right at the beginning was justice. And then all these other, and upon that justice, so the first, it starts out with just judgment. Of course, I'm using King James, justice. And then it goes into the structure. You covered all this in your initial comments. It goes into structure, then it goes into principles and laws. And what struck me so much is this is the basis of civilization. 3,500 years ago, you see the basis of law and order. One thing that was very interesting that I think is subtle, two witnesses, but it didn't say they had to be men. So in the Quran, you can have two witnesses are necessary. Only one, let me think about this. Only one witness is necessary, I believe, unless it's a woman, or two witnesses or two men. So I have to go back and look, but women don't have the same rights when it comes to being a witness. And other things that were in there, I think Catherine touched on the idea of the trees. There's a concept of ecology. And what is the good fruit? Those are the good people as well, the good teachings and so forth. So I don't want to dwell on it. There's just so much, but it struck me. There's so much about civilization. The idea of not taking money. I'm sorry. Look at the world we live in. And there's just thing after thing. And then, we talk so much about the Greeks and the Romans and so forth. This preceded this. You don't know this, but in the Baha'i writings, it says that the philosophers of Greece learned from the prophets of Israel. It's in the Baha'i writings. Okay, so for Baha'i, that's important to me. Another thing is, so here we have the foundation of justice. So for those of us who believe in a progressive revelation, including Christ, Christ didn't have to do any of this. He brought love. The structure was already there. Now, whether it was abused or not, that's another story. Caesar could be pretty rough. So, yeah, it's just powerful. 3,500 years ago, if you start looking at all the little things in here, how applicable they are. And praise be to God for that.
Thank you, Robert. So here's how you've inspired me to cohere our session this evening by referencing that stunning verse, justice, justice shall you pursue. What you got me to think about was it's a verse that presumes you'll never fully get to the final construct of what justice is. And but on the other hand, it also assumes that the pursuit of that justice is in fact the fulfillment of justice.
That's beautiful.
So that notion of an ongoing, innovative, creative dissatisfaction with currency is also, I think, what's in the Hopper painting. It is not merely a resignation about the alienation and the loneliness that exists. It is a provocation to pursue something different, the creation of a different world, which Hopper is hinting is possible for us to do. And as Abraham Joshua Heschel said, we can find the language that will allow us to understand the future in spite of the present. God bless you all. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
enlightening me and for being a source of love and coherence. God bless you all.
God bless you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Be well. Thank you.
Yeah.
Which was the judge when